When a wealthy horse breeder turned away from a blind newborn foal, no one expected a humble farmer's decision to raise it would change the face of competitive racing forever. What happened next left the equestrian world speechless, proving that sometimes the greatest champions are born in the most unlikely places. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rolling hills of Kentucky's Bluegrass country, where pristine white fences stretched as far as the eye could see. Jack Henderson stood at the gates of Silvercrest Stables, his weathered hands gripping a worn leather folder containing years of careful breeding records. The prestigious facility before him represented everything he'd worked for in his 30 years of horse breeding, but today something felt different. Inside the immaculate breeding barn, tension filled the air as Sarah Mitchell, Silvercrest's head veterinarian, delivered the news to Maxwell Richmond, the facility's billionaire owner. The foal was born blind, Mr. Richmond. It's a congenital condition. Both eyes are affected. She gestured toward the wobbly-legged newborn huddled against its mother in the corner stall. Maxwell's face darkened as he stared at the coal-black foal, his investment of millions in champion bloodlines seemingly wasted in an instant. The colt's dam, Midnight Symphony, had been purchased for $8 million at auction, and her breeding to Triple Crown winner Storm's legacy had cost another $1 million. This foal was supposed to be his next champion. Useless, Maxwell spat, turning away from the stall. Have it euthanized. I don't need a blind horse taking up space and resources. His Italian leather shoes clicked against the concrete floor as he strode toward the exit, not bothering to look back at the trembling newborn. Jack had been standing quietly in the corner, observing. As the facility's breeding manager, he'd overseen countless births, but something about this foal tugged at his heart. The tiny colt's ears swiveled alertly, tracking sounds with remarkable precision despite his blindness. There was an intelligence in his movements, a determination in the way he struggled to his feet again and again. "Sir," Jack called out, his voice steady despite his racing heart, "before you make that decision, let me take him." Maxwell turned, his eyebrows arched in surprise. "You want a blind horse, Henderson. Don't waste your time. It'll never amount to anything." Sarah stepped forward, hope flickering in her eyes. "The foal is healthy otherwise, Mr. Richmond. Strong heart, good conformation. The blindness doesn't have to be a death sentence." "Fine." Maxwell waved his hand dismissively. "Take it if you want, Henderson, but don't expect to keep your position. Here if you're going to waste time on lost causes. I need someone focused on producing champions, not saving rejects." Jack straightened his shoulders, removing his facility ID badge and placing it on a nearby shelf. "Then consider this my resignation, sir." He walked to the stall, kneeling beside the foal, who turned toward the sound of his movement with pricked ears. "You're throwing away a 20-year career for a blind horse?" Maxwell's incredulous laugh echoed through the barn. "You're even more foolish than I thought." Jack didn't respond as he gently ran his hands over the foal's body, feeling the strong muscles already developing beneath the sleek black coat. The colt didn't flinch at his touch. Instead, he leaned into it, nickering softly. "I'll help you transport him," Sarah whispered, already gathering supplies. "My trailer's outside." As they prepared to move the foal, workers gathered at the barn entrance, whispers spreading quickly about Jack's decision. Most shook their heads in disbelief. Giving up a six-figure salary and prestigious position for a blind foal seemed like madness. The drive to Jack's small farm was silent, but his mind raced with plans. The 10 acres he'd inherited from his father wasn't much compared to Silvercrest's sprawling empire, but it was paid for, and he'd managed to save a decent amount over the years. It would have to be enough. As they unloaded the foal at his modest barn, Sarah helped settle him into a clean stall with his mother, who had fortunately been included in the deal, Maxwell wanting nothing to do with either of them. "What are you going to name him?" Sarah asked, watching the colt navigate his new space with careful steps. Jack smiled, observing how the morning light caught the iridescent sheen of the foal's black coat. "Echo," he said softly, "because he'll learn to see the world through sound, and he's going to echo through the halls of every doubter who said he couldn't succeed." Sarah touched his arm gently. "You're taking on a huge challenge, Jack, training a blind horse. It's never been done successfully in racing." "Maybe that's because nobody's given them a real chance," Jack replied, his voice firm with conviction. "Look at him. He's already learning to map his space. He's got heart, Sarah. Sometimes that's worth more than perfect eyes." As if in response, Echo whinnied softly and made his way unerringly to Jack's side, pressing his velvet muzzle against the man's weathered hand. In that moment, Jack felt the rightness of his decision settle deep in his bones. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Jack transformed his small barn, padding sharp corners and establishing clear pathways. He spent hours sitting in Echo's stall, talking softly, letting the colt learn his voice and presence. He noticed how Echo's ears constantly moved, cataloguing every sound, building an acoustic map of his world. Word spread quickly through the local horse community about Jack's foolish decision. Former colleagues drove past his farm slowly, some stopping to try to talk sense into him. Others just shook their heads and whispered about how the pressure of working at Silvercrest must have finally broken him. One evening, as Jack sat on his porch watching Echo explore the small paddock he'd carefully enclosed, his oldest friend, Mike, pulled up in his truck. Mike, a successful trainer himself, walked up the gravel path with concern etched on his face. "Jack, I heard what happened," Mike said, settling into a chair. "Have you lost your mind? 20 years at Silvercrest, about to be promoted to director of operations, and you throw it all away for a blind colt." Jack took a slow sip of his coffee, watching Echo confidently navigate the paddock. "Look at him, Mike. Really look. See how he's learning every inch of that space, how he turns his head to track sounds we can barely hear. There's something special there." Mike sighed. "Special doesn't win races, Jack. You can't train a blind horse to run competitively. It's impossible. What's your plan here?" "Who says it's impossible?" Jack turned to his friend. "Because it hasn't been done before? Every great achievement in history started with someone trying the impossible." As if to emphasize his point, Echo broke into a run, circling the paddock with surprising grace. His hooves beat a steady rhythm against the ground as he moved, head held high, ears swiveling to maintain his orientation. Mike leaned forward, despite himself impressed by the colt's fluid movement. "Even if you could train him, no one will let a blind horse race. The liability alone." "Then we'll change their minds," Jack said simply. "We'll show them what's possible when you believe in something everyone else has written off." That night, after Mike left, Jack sat in Echo's stall, his hand resting on the colt's strong neck. "We're going to prove them all wrong, buddy," he whispered. "You and me, we're going to write a new chapter in racing history." Echo nickered softly, pressing closer to Jack's side. In the quiet of the barn, with the stars twinkling through the window and the gentle sounds of horses settling for the night, Jack began to outline his plan. He would need to develop entirely new training methods, find ways to teach Echo to race using sound and touch as his guides. It would be the challenge of a lifetime, but looking at the brave little colt beside him, Jack knew with absolute certainty that he'd made the right choice. Sometimes the greatest victories come from daring to believe in something everyone else has dismissed as worthless. As he made his way back to his house, Jack paused to look up at the night sky. His father's words from long ago echoed in his mind. "Son, the measure of a man isn't in what he gains, but in what he's willing to risk for what he believes in." Tomorrow they would begin their journey, a journey that would eventually shock the racing world and change people's perceptions of what was possible. But for now, Jack smiled, knowing that he'd already won the most important race. The race against fear and doubt, against the safe and expected path. In the barn, Echo stood alert, his ears following Jack's departing footsteps, already learning to trust the man who had seen his potential when others saw only limitations. The real work would begin with the dawn, but the foundation was already being laid, a foundation built on belief, determination, and the kind of courage that dares to defy conventional wisdom. The sun hadn't yet crept over the horizon when Jack began his morning routine at the farm. The pre-dawn air carried a crisp bite, and frost sparkled on the grass like scattered diamonds. Inside the barn, Echo's ears pricked forward at the sound of Jack's familiar footsteps on the gravel path. "Morning, champion," Jack called softly, his voice carrying warmth despite the cold. Echo responded with a gentle nicker, already moving confidently toward the stall door. In just a few weeks, the colt had mapped every inch of his space, his other senses compensating remarkably for his lack of sight. As Jack went about his morning chores, his mind wandered back to his childhood, to the lessons his father had taught him about horses. "They're like mirrors, son," his father would say, "reflecting back whatever we put into them. Fear, trust, doubt, or belief." Sarah arrived just as the sun began painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. She'd been stopping by regularly, monitoring Echo's progress and helping Jack develop innovative training techniques. Today, she carried a large duffel bag filled with equipment they'd specially designed. "Ready to try something new?" she asked, pulling out what looked like a modified horse halter fitted with small bells. "I was thinking about how dolphins navigate using echolocation. What if we could create something similar for Echo?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Jack examined the halter with interest. Small bells of varying tones were strategically placed to create different sound patterns when the horse moved in specific ways. "This is brilliant, Sarah. It could help him understand his own body position better." They spent the next hour introducing Echo to the new equipment, watching in amazement as the intelligent colt quickly began associating different bell combinations with different movements. When he held his head at the proper angle for collection, a particular chime rang out, and he soon learned to maintain that position. "You know," Sarah said, watching Echo practice, "I've been doing some research. There's documented cases of blind horses in the wild surviving with their herds. They adapt, learn to follow the sounds of their companions, use their other senses to navigate. We're not trying to do the impossible, we're just learning from nature. Jack nodded, his hand resting on Echo's neck. That's exactly what I've been thinking. We don't need to teach him to see. We need to help him use what he already has, in new ways. As they worked, Jack noticed something remarkable. Echo wasn't just learning to cope with his blindness, he was developing abilities that sighted horses didn't possess. His hearing had become so acute that he could detect the subtle change in ground texture from the sound of his own hoofbeats. His proprioception, awareness of his body position, was extraordinary. "Watch this," Jack said, leading Echo to the small training ring they'd set up. He'd installed a series of ground poles, typically used for basic training exercises, but instead of having Echo step over them visually, they'd attached small devices that emitted different tones when the horse approached. Echo moved through the course with increasing confidence, adjusting his stride length based on the changing sounds. When he successfully completed the pattern, Jack rewarded him with his favorite treat, fresh carrots from the garden his father had planted years ago. "You're doing something revolutionary here, Jack," Sarah said, making notes in her journal. "This isn't just about training a blind horse. You're developing entirely new methods that could help other animals with disabilities." As they continued working, a truck pulled up to the fence. Jack recognized Mike's vehicle and waved his friend over. Mike climbed out, carrying a large box that clinked as he walked. "Thought you could use these," Mike said, setting down the box. Inside were dozens of small electronic sensors. "My brother works in tech development. When I told him what you're doing, he got excited. These are prototype motion sensors. They emit different tones based on proximity and movement. Maybe they could help with training." Jack felt a lump form in his throat. After weeks of skepticism and doubt from the horse community, this gesture of support meant more than he could express. "Mike, thank you." They spent the afternoon experimenting with the sensors, placing them at various points around the training area. Echo quickly learned to associate different tones with different distances and obstacles, building an ever more sophisticated understanding of his environment. As the day progressed, more unexpected visitors arrived. First came old Tom Wilson, the retired farrier who'd worked with Jack's father. He brought specialized shoes he'd designed to help Echo better feel the ground texture. Then Maria Garcia, who trained therapy horses, stopped by with ideas about using touch signals and ground vibrations for communication. What had started as a solitary mission was gradually becoming something bigger. Each visitor brought not just practical help, but also stories of other impossible achievements in the horse world, of animals and humans overcoming seemingly insurmountable obstacles. That evening, as Jack sat on his porch watching Echo graze confidently in the paddock, he pulled out his father's old journal. The leather was worn smooth from years of handling, the pages filled with observations about horses and life. He found the entry he was looking for, written the year before his father passed. "Today I watched a three-legged dog outrun every other dog at the park. It reminded me that limitations are often just challenges waiting to be reframed. The dog didn't waste time mourning its missing leg. It simply learned a new way to run." Jack smiled, thinking how his father would have loved Echo. He would have seen past the blindness to the heart beneath, just as he'd always seen past surface appearances, to the true potential within. A soft nickering drew his attention back to the paddock. Echo had moved to the fence, his ears focused on Jack, waiting for their evening routine. Jack walked over, running his hands along the colt's sleek neck. The transformation in just a few weeks was remarkable. Echo's coat gleamed with health, his muscles developing beautifully under their carefully planned exercise regime. "You're teaching me as much as I'm teaching you," Jack murmured. Echo's ears flicked forward, catching each word. About trust, about finding new ways when the old ones aren't available, about believing in possibilities others can't see. Later, that night, after Echo was settled in his stall, Jack sat at his kitchen table with Sarah and Mike, planning the next phase of training. The wall behind them was covered with diagrams, notes, and research papers about equine sensory development. "We need to think about introducing him to other horses soon," Sarah suggested, sketching out a timeline. "If we're serious about eventually getting him to race, he needs to be comfortable working around them." Mike, who had transformed from skeptic to enthusiast, added, "I've got a couple of retired racehorses who are calm and predictable. We could start with them, let Echo learn to read their movements through sound and air pressure." Jack agreed, but his mind was already racing ahead to bigger challenges. "We also need to start thinking about how to approach the racing commission. They've never had to consider a case like this before." "One step at a time," Sarah reminded him gently. "Echo's already proving so many people wrong. Let's focus on building his confidence and skills before we tackle the bureaucracy." As his friends continued discussing possibilities, Jack found himself reflecting on how much had changed in just a few weeks. He'd walked away from a prestigious career, faced ridicule and doubt, and embarked on what many considered an impossible mission. But watching Echo's daily progress, seeing how the colt approached each new challenge with courage and intelligence, he knew they were creating something extraordinary. Outside, an owl called softly in the darkness. Echo's response nickered through the night, a sound full of confidence and trust. In that moment, Jack realized they weren't just training a blind horse. They were showing the world that limitations only exist where imagination ends. The path ahead would be challenging, filled with obstacles both physical and bureaucratic. But with each small victory, each new skill mastered, they were building more than just a training program. They were building hope, proving that sometimes the greatest achievements come from daring to try what others claim cannot be done. The morning mist clung low to the ground as two trailers pulled into Jack's farm. Mike had arrived with his retired racehorses Storm and Thunder for Echo's first interaction with potential training partners. Sarah stood beside Jack, monitoring Echo's reaction as the newcomers were unloaded. Echo's ears swiveled with intense focus, tracking every sound. The clang of trailer ramps, the steady hoofbeats on metal, and the soft snorts of the new arrivals. His head held high, nostrils flaring as he processed their scents on the morning breeze. "He's not showing any anxiety," Sarah noted, scribbling in her ever-present journal. "Look how he's analyzing them through his other senses." Jack nodded, watching as Echo moved along his paddock fence, matching the other horses' movements. The colt's ability to create detailed mental maps of his environment had grown remarkably. Now he was applying those same skills to tracking living, moving objects. "Let's start with Storm," Mike suggested, leading the gentle grey gelding toward Echo's enclosure. "He's always been good with young horses." They carefully orchestrated the introduction, using the series of bells and sensors they'd developed. to help Echo understand exactly where Storm was at all times. To everyone's amazement, Echo began mimicking Storm's movements, matching his stride patterns and head carriage simply by listening. "This is extraordinary," Sarah breathed, filming the interaction on her phone. "He's learning through sound, the way most horses learn through sight." As the morning progressed, they watched Echo develop a remarkable synchronization with Storm. The blind colt would position himself parallel to the older horse, maintaining a perfect distance by using the sound of Storm's hoofbeats as a guide. When Storm broke into a trot, Echo matched his pace with uncanny precision. "You know what this reminds me of?" Mike said, leaning against the fence. "Those military formations where soldiers march in step. Echo's not just following, he's creating a coordinated partnership based on rhythm and sound." Jack felt pride swell in his chest as he watched his brave colt master yet another challenge. But their moment of celebration was interrupted by the sound of an approaching vehicle. A sleek black SUV pulled up to the farm, and Jack's heart sank when he recognized Maxwell Richmond stepping out. The billionaire's expensive shoes were soon covered in dust as he walked toward them, his face set in its usual mask of condescending amusement. "Well, well," he called out, "I heard rumors about your little experiment, Henderson. Had to see for myself what kind of circus you're running here." Before Jack could respond, Echo demonstrated exactly what kind of circus they were running. The colt, sensing the tension in the air, performed a perfect collected trot alongside Storm, their movements so synchronized it seemed impossible that one of them couldn't see. Maxwell's smirk faltered slightly as he watched. "Cute trick," he said, but his voice held a note of uncertainty. "But it's a long way from following another horse around a paddock to actually racing." "Why don't you stay and watch for a while?" Sarah suggested, her tone professional but firm. "See exactly what Echo can do before you make judgments." To their surprise, Maxwell did stay, watching with increasing interest as they demonstrated the innovative training methods they'd developed. Echo navigated increasingly complex patterns, responding to different sound cues, maintaining perfect rhythm and balance despite his blindness. The sensors help him create a three-dimensional map of his environment, Sarah explained, showing Maxwell their setup. Combined with his natural abilities, he's developing a way of understanding space that might actually give him advantages in certain situations. "Advantages?" Maxwell scoffed, but his eyes never left Echo. "How could being blind possibly be an advantage?" Jack stepped forward, his voice quiet but confident. "Because he's not distracted by visual input. He feels the track in a way other horses don't. Listen." They fell silent, and in that quiet, they could hear the perfectly timed rhythm of Echo's hooves, the way he adjusted his stride based on subtle changes in the ground's texture. The colt moved with a fluid grace that spoke of complete body awareness. "Here's something interesting we've discovered," Sarah added, pulling up data on her tablet. Echo's proprioception, his awareness of his body position, tests off the charts. It's like his brain has rewired itself to create new pathways for understanding movement and space. Maxwell studied the data, his expression thoughtful. "Even if what you're saying is true, no racing commission would ever allow a blind horse to compete, the liability alone." "That's why we're documenting everything," Jack explained. "Every breakthrough, every safety protocol we develop. We're not just training a horse, we're creating a new paradigm for what's possible." As if to emphasize Jack's point, Echo broke into a gallop, running precise circles around his paddock, never missing a step, never faltering. The power and confidence in his movement was undeniable. "You know what this reminds me of?" Mike interjected, addressing Maxwell. "The first time they tried to introduce starting gates in racing, everyone said it was too dangerous, that it would never work. Now we can't imagine racing without them. Sometimes progress requires us to rethink what we believe is impossible." Maxwell watched Echo for a long moment, his businessman's mind clearly calculating possibilities. Finally, he turned to Jack. "You're still crazy, Henderson," he said, but there was a hint of respect in his voice. "But maybe that's what it takes to change the game." He handed Jack his business card. "Keep me updated on his progress." After Maxwell left, the team gathered in Jack's kitchen, energized by the unexpected turn of events. Having Maxwell Richmond's interest, even if it's skeptical, could be huge, Sarah said, adding notes to their growing documentation. His influence in the racing world. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Jack cautioned, but he couldn't help smiling. "We've still got a lot of work to do." That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Jack sat in Echo's stall, sharing his thoughts with the colt as he often did. "You know what I learned today, buddy? Sometimes our biggest critics can become our greatest opportunities. You just keep showing them what you can do." Echo nickered softly, resting his head against Jack's shoulder. In the peaceful moment, Jack reflected on how far they'd come and the challenges still ahead. But with each day, their impossible dream seemed a little more possible. The next morning, they began working with both storm and thunder together, teaching Echo to position himself confidently between two moving horses. The colt's ability to process and respond to multiple sound sources simultaneously was remarkable. "It's like he's creating a symphony in his mind," Sarah observed, watching Echo weave smoothly between the two horses. Each hoofbeat, each breath, each shift in movement becomes part of his understanding of space and motion. As they worked, more visitors began arriving at the farm. Word had spread about the blind colt who moved like a seeing horse, and people wanted to witness it for themselves. Among them was Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a leading researcher in equine neurology. "What you're doing here is groundbreaking," she told them after observing Echo's training. "You're not just working around his blindness, you're helping him develop entirely new neural pathways. This could have implications far beyond racing." The validation from respected professionals helped strengthen their resolve, but Jack knew the real test still lay ahead. They would need to prove not just that Echo could run, but that he could compete safely alongside other horses in the intensity of a real race. As the day drew to a close, Jack watched Echo running alongside his companions, moving with a confidence that defied his condition. In his heart, he knew they were witnessing something extraordinary, not just the training of a horse, but the expansion of what everyone believed was possible. That night, he added a new entry to their growing documentation. "Perhaps the real miracle isn't that a blind horse can learn to run, but that he's teaching us to see possibilities we never imagined existed." Dawn broke over the practice track. Jack had carefully constructed on his property, the morning light revealing months of meticulous preparation. Custom-designed sensors lined the oval course, creating an intricate network of sound guidance that would help Echo navigate at racing. Speeds. Today marked their first attempt at true race conditions. Dr. Rodriguez had arrived early, setting up sophisticated monitoring equipment to record Echo's neurological responses during high-speed running. Sarah tested the specialized racing equipment. They developed lightweight sensors integrated into Echo's racing tack that provided constant spatial feedback. "Remember," Sarah cautioned as they prepared, "today isn't about speed. We're testing the effectiveness of the guidance system at higher velocities." She adjusted the small transmitter that would allow Jack to communicate with Echo through a series of coded tones. Mike arrived with his experienced racehorses, now familiar training partners for Echo. The blind colt's ears pricked forward at the sound of their arrival, his muscles quivering with anticipation. Over the months, he developed an extraordinary ability to read the subtlest changes in air pressure and sound that indicated movement around him. "Let's get him warmed up," Jack said, leading Echo through their established routine. The colt moved with fluid grace, responding to verbal cues and sound signals with practiced precision. His hooves seemed to dance across the ground, each step perfectly placed despite his lack of sight. Dr. Rodriguez watched intently, her equipment recording every aspect of Echo's movement. "His spatial awareness is unprecedented," she remarked. "Look at how he's processing multiple audio inputs simultaneously, creating a real-time map of his environment." They started with basic exercises, Echo running alongside Storm at a controlled pace, using the older horse's steady rhythm as a guide. The sensors along the track provided constant feedback, helping Echo understand his position and speed. "Ready to increase the pace?" Jack asked, his hand steady on Echo's neck. The colt's response was immediate, an eager toss of his head, muscles bunching in anticipation. They'd been building to this moment for months, gradually increasing speed and complexity in their training. As Echo broke into a gallop, the assembled team held their breath. The colt's stride opened up, powerful and sure, his movements perfectly synchronized with the guidance system. He matched Storm stride for stride, maintaining his position with uncanny precision. "This is remarkable," Dr. Rodriguez breathed, studying the real-time data streaming across her monitors. "His neural patterns show he's created entirely new pathways for processing spatial information. He's not just compensating for blindness, he's developed a completely different way of understanding motion and space." But their breakthrough moment was interrupted by an unexpected arrival. A local news van pulled up to the farm's entrance, followed by several cars. Word had spread about their unique training program, and media interest was growing. "Mr. Henderson," a reporter called out, hurrying toward the track with a cameraman in tow. "Is it true you're training a blind horse to race? How is that even possible?" Jack exchanged glances with his team. They'd known they couldn't keep their project secret forever, but they hadn't planned on revealing it quite yet. Before he could respond, Echo provided an answer of his own. The colt, sensing the excitement in the air, executed a perfect figure-eight pattern between storm and thunder, responding to the subtle sound cues with breathtaking precision. The reporters stood slack-jawed as the blind horse demonstrated abilities that seemed to defy explanation. "What you're witnessing," Sarah stepped forward, her voice clear and professional, "is the result of months of scientific research and innovative training methods. Echo isn't just running, he's revolutionizing our understanding of equine capabilities." As cameras rolled, they demonstrated their training system. Dr. Rodriguez explained the neurological aspects, while Sarah detailed the technological innovations they developed. Jack focused on working with Echo, showing how the colt responded to different audio cues and position indicators. "But how can you ensure it's safe?" one reporter asked. "A blind horse in an actual race." "Watch," Jack said simply. He gave a series of signals, and Echo began running the track at full speed. The colt's movements were fluid and confident, his stride powerful and sure. When Jack introduced obstacles, changing sound patterns that indicated Echo needed to adjust. His position, the horse responded instantly, never missing a step. The demonstration drew more spectators throughout the morning. Local horse trainers arrived, then racing officials, all drawn by the spreading news of the blind colt who moved like a seeing horse. Even skeptics fell silent, watching Echo navigate complex patterns at racing speeds, using only sound and air pressure to guide him. Among the growing crowd, Jack spotted Maxwell Richmond, standing quietly at the back. The billionaire's expression was unreadable as he watched Echo perform, but he didn't leave, and he took extensive notes. By afternoon, social media was buzzing with videos of Echo's performance. Comments ranged from amazed to skeptical, but no one could deny the extraordinary nature of what they were witnessing. "You realize what this means," Sarah said quietly, as they reviewed the morning's data. "We can't keep this small anymore. The world is watching now." Jack nodded, stroking Echo's neck as the colt cooled down from his workout. "Maybe that's not a bad thing. The more people see what's possible, the harder it will be for them to say it can't be done." That evening, as the excitement died down and the visitors departed, Jack sat in the quiet barn with Echo. The colt was tired but content, his accomplishments of the day evident in his relaxed demeanor. "You showed them all today, buddy," Jack murmured. "But this is just the beginning. Now we have to prove we can do it consistently, safely, in any conditions." A soft nicker was Echo's only response, but in that simple sound, Jack heard the same quiet confidence that had marked every step of their journey. They weren't just training a horse anymore. They were challenging fundamental assumptions about limitations and possibility. Dr. Rodriguez's final report arrived later that night, filled with data that supported what they'd all witnessed. Echo's neural adaptation went beyond simple compensation. He had developed entirely new ways of processing and responding to his environment. "We're not just making history in horse racing," she wrote. "We're advancing our understanding of brain plasticity and sensory adaptation." Echo is showing us that what we consider disabilities might actually be gateways to discovering new human and animal capabilities. As Jack read the report, he remembered something his father used to say: "The biggest limits we face are the ones we place on our own imagination." Echo was living proof of that wisdom, pushing beyond the boundaries of what anyone thought possible. The next phase would bring new challenges, convincing racing authorities, developing safety protocols, preparing for the intensity of actual competition. But watching Echo rest peacefully in his stall, Jack felt a deep certainty that they would find a way. They had already accomplished the impossible. Everything else was just details. Outside, the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new doubters to convince, new obstacles to overcome. But tonight, they had shown the world that limitations exist only where imagination ends, and dreams have a power all their own when backed by dedication and belief. The Racing Commission boardroom fell silent as Jack finished his presentation. The wall-mounted screens still displayed the extensive data they'd collected over months of training: neural readings, safety protocols, video demonstrations. Echo's Story had captured global attention, but this moment, facing the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission, would determine whether their dream could become reality. Commissioner Margaret Chen leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "Mr. Henderson, while your research is impressive, we've never had a precedent for this. The safety concerns—" "With all due respect, Commissioner," Jack interrupted, his voice steady, "there was no precedent for starting gates either, until someone proved they could work. Every innovation in racing history started with someone willing to challenge the status quo." Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward, adding her scientific authority to the discussion. "The data is clear. Echo's spatial awareness actually exceeds that of sighted horses in many situations. His ability to process multiple sensory inputs simultaneously gives him unique advantages in tracking position and maintaining optimal racing lines." The commissioners exchanged glances. Chairman Robert Williams cleared his throat. "Perhaps a demonstration would be in order. We'd need to see Echo perform under controlled conditions before we could even consider." "Name the time and place," Jack said immediately. "Echo will prove himself." 2 weeks later, they stood at Churchill Downs, the historic track empty except for racing officials, safety experts, and a select group of observers. Echo stood calmly in the pre-dawn light, his coat gleaming, the specialized racing equipment, barely visible beneath his tack. Sarah ran through final equipment checks while Mike positioned his horses. They would run alongside Echo to simulate race conditions. Dr. Rodriguez set up her monitoring equipment, ready to collect more data to support their case. "Remember," Jack murmured to Echo, "just like we practiced. Show them what you can do." The demonstration began with basic safety protocols: emergency stops, position adjustments, response to unexpected stimuli. Echo performed flawlessly, responding to every signal with precise accuracy. His ability to maintain perfect position between two galloping horses drew murmurs of appreciation from even the most skeptical observers. Then came the speed trials. As Echo accelerated into a full gallop, his movements were poetry in motion. The sophisticated guidance system they'd developed allowed him to run the perfect racing line, his stride powerful and sure. He navigated turns with remarkable precision, using the track's subtle changes in texture and sound to guide his path. "Extraordinary," Chairman Williams breathed, watching Echo match pace with Mike's experienced racers. "His form is perfect." The final test involved unexpected obstacles and changes in pace. Safety officers moved barriers onto the track, altered sound patterns, created challenging scenarios. Echo responded to each challenge with uncanny awareness, adjusting his position and speed without hesitation. As the demonstration concluded, even the most doubtful commissioners were nodding in appreciation. Echo had shown them something they'd never seen before: a horse running, not despite his blindness, but with a new kind of awareness that transformed his perceived disability into a unique advantage. "Mr. Henderson," Commissioner Chen said, approaching as Echo cooled down, "you've given us a lot to think about. This isn't just about one horse anymore, is it? This could change everything we think we know about training and racing." Jack stroked Echo's neck, feeling the power still thrumming through the colt's muscles. "That's what I've been trying to say. Echo isn't just proving that a blind horse can run. He's showing us there are whole new ways of understanding what's possible." The Commission's decision came 3 days later. They would allow Echo to race under carefully monitored conditions. The news spread like wildfire through the racing world, generating heated debates and unprecedented media attention. Maxwell Richmond was among the first to call. "Henderson," his voice carried an unfamiliar note of respect, "you've done the impossible. Now let's make history." He offered to sponsor Echo's racing campaign, providing resources to further develop their innovative training methods. But with approval came new challenges. Some trainers protested, claiming Echo's specialized equipment gave him an unfair advantage. Others worried his presence would disrupt other horses. Each objection required patience, demonstration, and evidence to overcome. Through it all, Echo remained calm, as if understanding the importance of every test, every demonstration. His quiet confidence seemed to affect everyone who watched him work. It was hard to maintain skepticism in the face of such clear capability. Sarah developed simplified versions of their training systems to share with therapeutic riding programs, showing how their innovations could help other horses with visual impairments. Dr. Rodriguez's research expanded into studies of sensory adaptation in other animals, opening new frontiers in understanding animal cognition. The morning of Echo's first official race dawned clear and cool. The stands were packed, drawn by the unprecedented event about to unfold. In the paddock, Jack adjusted Echo's equipment one final time, his hands steady despite the butterflies. In his stomach, "Whatever happens today," he told Echo, "you've already won. You've shown them all what's possible when someone believes in you." Echo's ears pricked forward at Jack's voice, his posture relaxed but alert. In the months of preparation, he'd developed an almost supernatural ability to read the energy around him, to find calm in the midst of chaos. As they walked to the starting gate, a hush fell over the crowd. The other horses and jockeys cast curious glances at the blind colt with his specialized equipment. But Echo moved with quiet confidence, guided by the sounds and sensations he'd learned to trust. The starter called them to position. Echo settled into the gate with perfect composure, his ears moving constantly, building his acoustic picture of the space around him. The tension mounted as the last horse loaded. The bell rang, the gates crashed open, and Echo showed the world what was possible when limitations become launching points for innovation. That day became more than a race. It became a symbol of the power of believing in potential others couldn't see. Echo's story inspired a wave of new research into animal capabilities, sparked innovations in therapeutic riding, and challenged assumptions about limitations in both humans and animals. Years later, Jack would read letters from people around the world who found courage in Echo's example. Parents of children with disabilities, athletes overcoming injuries, researchers exploring new frontiers, all drew inspiration from the blind horse who refused to be limited by what others thought impossible. In the quiet evenings at the farm, watching Echo graze peacefully in his paddock, Jack often reflected on their journey. They'd done more than prove a blind horse could race. They'd shown that sometimes the greatest victories come from daring to imagine beyond the boundaries of what others believe possible. Echo's legacy wasn't just in the records he set or the races he won. It was in the minds he opened and the dreams he inspired. He showed the world that disabilities can become abilities when viewed through the lens of possibility rather than limitation. And in that achievement lay a truth that transcended horse racing. The human spirit, when combined with compassion and innovation, has the power to transform perceived weaknesses into extraordinary strengths. The crowd's roar at Churchill Downs felt like a physical force as Echo thundered down the final stretch. His specialized senses provided perfect spatial awareness as he navigated between competitors, each hoofbeat precisely placed. Jack watched from the rail, his heart pounding as Echo responded to every subtle sound cue with masterful precision. Third place. Second. The crowd's cheering reached a fever pitch as Echo drew even with the leader. In that moment, time seemed to slow. Jack could see every muscle rippling under Echo's gleaming coat, could feel the pure power and determination radiating from the horse who had defied every limitation placed upon him. The finish line approached. Echo's jockey, Maria Torres, worked in perfect harmony with the guidance system, trusting in the months of training and innovation that had brought them to this moment. The other horses pressed in, but Echo held his line with supernatural awareness of the space around him. One final surge. The crowd erupted as Echo thrust his nose in front, crossing the wire a neck ahead of the favorite. History had been made. The first blind horse to win a major race at Churchill Downs, but this victory represented something far greater than a single race. As Echo pranced into the winner's circle, his ears proudly pricked forward at the familiar sounds of Jack's footsteps, the impact reached far beyond the racing world. Dr. Rodriguez rushed forward, her monitoring equipment revealing extraordinary data about Echo's performance. His neural patterns during the race were remarkable, she exclaimed. He wasn't just running, he was creating a four-dimensional map of the entire field, processing multiple sensory inputs simultaneously. This goes beyond compensation for blindness. He's developed entirely new ways of understanding and navigating space. The media descended in force, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. But it was a quiet voice that caught Jack's attention. A small girl in a wheelchair made her way forward, her parents close behind. "Mr. Henderson," she called out, her voice trembling with excitement. "Echo showed them all, didn't he? Just like you said he would." Jack recognized her, Emily Chen, a regular visitor to their training sessions. Born with cerebral palsy, she had found inspiration in Echo's story, refusing to let others define her limitations. "He sure did, Emily," Jack replied, helping her reach out to touch Echo's nose. The horse lowered his head gently, somehow sensing the need for extra care. "And you're going to show them too, aren't you?" Emily's smile could have lit up the darkening track. "I started my new therapy program," she announced proudly. "The doctor said I might not walk, but Echo proved that might not doesn't mean can't." This was the true victory, not the trophy being presented, not the headlines that would splash across tomorrow's papers, but the lives being transformed by Echo's example. Maxwell Richmond approached, his usual composure slightly ruffled by excitement. "Henderson," he said, extending his hand, "I was wrong about Echo, about all of this. The implications for the sport, for rehabilitation programs, for our understanding of what's possible." He shook his head in wonder. "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" Jack nodded, watching as Sarah demonstrated their guidance system to a group of therapeutic riding instructors. The technology they'd developed for Echo was already being adapted for other applications, opening new possibilities for horses and humans alike. Mike appeared with his tablet, showing Jack the social media explosion. Echo the Blind Wonder was trending worldwide, with millions sharing their own stories of overcoming perceived limitations. Videos of the race were going viral, accompanied by messages of hope and determination. But it was Dr. Rodriguez's latest research paper that truly captured the significance of their achievement. Titled Neuroplasticity and Sensory Adaptation, Lessons from a Blind Racehorse, it detailed how Echo's training had revealed new understanding about the brain's ability to adapt and create alternative pathways for processing information. "We're seeing applications far beyond horse racing," she explained to the gathered press. "Echo's development of enhanced spatial awareness through sound and vibration is helping us understand how to better assist both animals and humans with visual impairments. His success is revolutionizing our approach to adaptive training and therapy." As the excitement continued to build, Jack led Echo back to the quiet of his temporary stall. The colt's coat was still damp with effort, but his ears moved alertly, taking in every sound. In these private moments, Jack often marveled at how far they'd come from that first day at Silvercrest Stables. Sarah joined them, her arms full of printouts showing Echo's performance data. "Look at these readings," she said excitedly. "His response time to acoustic signals is faster than any sighted horse we've tested. He's not just compensating for blindness. He's developed superior abilities in other areas." "It makes sense," Jack replied, remembering his father's words about limitations being opportunities in disguise. "When you can't rely on sight, you develop other ways of understanding the world." Echo's taught us that sometimes what we think of as disabilities can become extraordinary abilities with the right support and innovation. The next few days were a whirlwind of interviews, demonstrations and meetings. Rehabilitation centers wanted to adapt their training methods. Research institutions proposed studies. Other trainers sought advice on working with horses with various physical challenges. But the most meaningful moments were the quiet ones, when people like Emily came to share how Echo's story had impacted their lives. A veteran learning to navigate life after losing his sight. A young athlete adapting to prosthetic limbs, parents of children with various challenges, all finding hope in the example of a blind horse who refused to be limited by others' expectations. One evening, as the sun set over Churchill Downs, Jack sat with Echo in the peaceful quiet of the stable. The colt's head rested comfortably on his shoulder, their breathing synchronized in the way that had become natural over their months together. "You've started something bigger than both of us, buddy," Jack murmured. "You're showing people that the only real limitations are the ones we accept without questioning." Echo's ears flicked forward at Jack's voice, and he nickered softly in response. In that moment, Jack remembered every doubt they'd faced, every obstacle they'd overcome, every small victory that had led to this tremendous achievement. The next morning brought new challenges, other races to prepare for, additional research to conduct, therapeutic programs to develop, but they faced each challenge with the quiet confidence that came from knowing that possibilities exist beyond the boundaries of conventional wisdom. As they prepared to return home, Dr. Rodriguez presented them with her latest findings. "Echo's success isn't just about proving a blind horse can race," she explained. "It's about understanding that different abilities create different possibilities. His blindness forced him to develop extraordinary capabilities in other areas, capabilities we might never have discovered if we'd been satisfied with traditional limitations." Loading Echo into the trailer for the journey home, Jack reflected on how their story had evolved. What had started as one man's belief in a blind foal's potential had grown into a movement that was changing perceptions and possibilities across multiple fields. The real victory wasn't just in proving that a blind horse could race. It was in showing the world that limitations are often just challenges waiting to be reframed through innovation, determination, and the courage to imagine new possibilities. As they pulled away from Churchill Downs, Jack could hear the quiet symphony of Echo's world, the subtle sounds and vibrations that had become his way of seeing. In that moment, he understood that they hadn't just trained a blind horse to race. They'd opened the world's eyes to new ways of perceiving potential and possibility. The sun rose over Jack's farm, casting a golden glow across the freshly painted research center that now stood alongside the original barn. 6 months after Echo's historic victory at Churchill Downs, their small operation had transformed into something extraordinary, a place where innovation and hope intertwined to create new possibilities. Inside the main facility, Dr. Rodriguez supervised the installation of state-of-the-art equipment, funded by a grant from Maxwell Richmond's foundation. The billionaire had become one of their strongest supporters, recognizing that Echo's success represented more than just a racing achievement. "Jack," Sarah called from the therapy arena where she was working with a new arrival, a young Arabian, horse-blinded in an accident. "Come see this. We're applying Echo's training methods, and the progress is incredible." Jack watched as the Arabian navigated an obstacle course using the refined version of their guidance system. The horse moved with growing confidence, its initial fear replaced by trust in the new ways of understanding its environment. 3 months ago, they were going to euthanize him, Sarah said softly. Now look, he's teaching us even more about adaptive training. Each horse responds differently, helps us refine our methods. Their facility had become a beacon of hope in the equestrian world. Beyond rehabilitation for visually impaired horses, they were discovering applications for horses with various physical challenges. Echo's success had opened minds to new possibilities in therapeutic riding and adaptive training. Maria Torres, Echo's jockey, arrived for their morning training session. Since their victory, she'd become an integral part of the team, helping develop specialized riding techniques for visually impaired horses. "Ready for today's challenge?" she asked, grinning as she adjusted her equipment. Today's goal was ambitious. They were testing a new version of their guidance system that would allow multiple blind horses to work together safely. The implications for group therapy and rehabilitation were enormous. Echo stood calmly at the center of the arena as 2 other visually impaired horses were led in. The sophisticated network of sensors and sound markers they'd developed created a precise spatial map that all 3 horses could navigate independently. "Remember when people said one blind horse racing was impossible?" Mike commented, watching. "The horses move in perfect coordination. Now look, we're creating entire adaptive training programs." But their impact reached far beyond the equestrian world. Emily Chen, now a regular at their facility, had started a youth advocacy group for children with disabilities. She organized weekly visits, showing how Echo's story could inspire young people to challenge their own perceived limitations. "It's not just about horses anymore," Emily explained to a group of visiting children. "It's about learning to see things differently, finding new ways to achieve what others say is impossible." The research center had also become a hub for international collaboration. Scientists and trainers from around the world came to study their methods, adapting them for various applications. A team from Japan was developing similar systems for guide dogs. Australian researchers were applying the principles to help wildlife injured in bushfires. Jack stood in Echo's stall, preparing him for their morning workout. The champion's coat gleamed with health, his muscles rippling with the confidence of an athlete in his prime. But it was his quiet awareness, his extraordinary ability to process and respond to his environment, that continued to amaze everyone who worked with him. "You know what I realized," Jack said to Sarah as they watched Echo work with the other. "Horses. We didn't just prove that a blind horse could race. We proved that sometimes what we think of as disabilities can lead to discovering entirely new capabilities." Dr. Rodriguez emerged from her lab, excitement evident in her voice. "The latest neural scans are fascinating," she announced. "We're seeing consistent patterns in how these horses develop enhanced sensory processing. Echo's brain actually created new neural pathways that we've never seen in sighted horses." Their morning session was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. Catherine Williams, head of the International Equestrian Federation, had arrived to observe their program. Her organization was considering new classifications for adaptive equestrian sports, inspired by Echo's success. "What you've created here goes beyond rehabilitation," she noted, watching the horses work. "You're revolutionizing our understanding of equine capabilities and training methods." Jack led her through the facility, showing how each innovation had grown from their work with Echo. The sophisticated guidance systems, the adaptive training techniques, the therapeutic applications, all had evolved from their initial challenge of helping one blind foal reach his potential. In the afternoon, they hosted their weekly community outreach program. Local families affected by various disabilities came to experience the healing power of working with their specially trained horses. The sight of children finding new confidence, of parents discovering new hope, reminded Jack daily of why their work mattered. Maxwell Richmond arrived later, bringing news that would further expand their impact. "The Foundation's board approved it," he announced. "We're establishing 5 new adaptive training centers across the country, all based on your methods. The expansion would mean more opportunities to help horses and humans alike. Each center would combine rehabilitation services with research facilities, creating a network of innovation and healing." As the day wound down, Jack took Echo for their evening walk. The champion moved with characteristic grace, his awareness of his surroundings so acute that it was easy to forget he couldn't see. They passed the memorial garden, where Jack had planted his father's favorite roses. "You know, Dad," he said softly, "I think you were right. Sometimes the biggest limitations are the ones we place on our own imagination." Echo nickered softly, pressing his head against Jack's shoulder. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of the facility preparing for evening, horses being fed, equipment being stored, the quiet conversations of staff finishing their day's work. Dr. Rodriguez approached with her tablet, showing Jack the latest data from their research. "We're seeing something remarkable," she explained. "The adaptive techniques we developed for Echo are helping us understand how all horses process sensory information. It's changing our fundamental understanding of equine cognition." Their success had created ripples of change throughout the racing world. Other tracks were developing adaptive racing programs, Training centers were incorporating their methods. The definition of what was possible in equestrian sports was expanding. But perhaps their greatest achievement was less tangible. It was in the hope they'd given to countless others facing their own challenges. Echo's story had become a symbol of the extraordinary possibilities that exist when someone dares to see beyond conventional limitations. As night fell over the farm, Jack sat in his office reviewing plans for their next innovation, a mobile training unit that could bring their methods to remote areas. On his wall hung photos documenting their journey, Echo's first training sessions, his historic victory, the growing facility that had sprung from their success. Each image told part of a larger story, not just about a blind horse who learned to race, but about the human capacity to reimagine what's possible. They had created more than a training program or a research facility. They had built a place where limitations became launching points for innovation, where challenges became opportunities for discovery. Tomorrow would bring new horses to help, new problems to solve, new boundaries to push. But tonight, Jack felt a deep satisfaction in knowing that their work was changing lives, one small victory at a time. In the quiet of the evening, Echo's steady breathing from the nearby stall reminded Jack of the truth at the heart of their journey. Sometimes the greatest achievements come not from overcoming limitations, but from daring to imagine beyond them. Winter descended on the farm, blanketing the research center in pristine white. Inside the heated indoor arena, Jack watched as Echo demonstrated their latest innovation, a completely automated guidance system that allowed blind horses to work independently. The technology had evolved far beyond their original designs, incorporating artificial intelligence that could predict and respond to the horse's movements in real time. It's remarkable. Dr. Sophia Chen, a visiting neuroscientist from MIT, observed, the system isn't just responding to the horse, it's learning and adapting to his unique patterns of movement and spatial awareness. Echo moved through the complex obstacle course with fluid grace, his hooves finding perfect placement despite the challenging setup. The sensors embedded throughout the arena created a three-dimensional map that transmitted directly to the specialized equipment he wore, allowing him to navigate with unprecedented precision. But today's demonstration wasn't just about showing off their technological achievements. In the observation area, representatives from the Paralympics Committee watched intently. They were considering the addition of adaptive equestrian events, inspired by the revolution Echo had sparked in the sporting world. What we're seeing here, committee member David Martinez noted, goes beyond adaptive sports. You're redefining what's possible in human-animal partnerships. The morning's activities were interrupted by an unexpected arrival. A horse trailer pulled up outside, and Sarah rushed in from the cold, her eyes bright with urgency. "Jack, you need to see this." Inside the trailer stood a massive Clydesdale, his powerful frame trembling. Like Echo, he was blind, but his condition had come from abuse and neglect. His previous owners had kept him in darkness for years, using him for heavy labor until his eyes had atrophied from lack of light. "His name is Thunder," Sarah explained, her voice tight with emotion. "Local authorities seized him during a raid. They were going to put him down, but someone remembered our program." Jack approached the frightened horse slowly, speaking in soft, measured tones. The Clydesdale's ears swiveled toward his voice, showing the same acute hearing they'd observed in other blind horses. Despite his size and obvious strength, Thunder's posture spoke of defeat and resignation. "We'll help him," Jack said firmly. But this is different from our other cases. We're not just dealing with physical blindness. We're dealing with trauma, with a spirit that's been broken. Dr. Rodriguez immediately began adapting their protocols for Thunder's unique situation. His neural patterns show severe stress responses, she reported after initial tests. But there's something else. His auditory processing is extraordinarily developed, even more so than Echo's was at first. They set up a specialized rehabilitation program, combining their proven methods with new approaches designed specifically for Thunder's needs. Echo became an unexpected part of the process, his calm presence and confident movements providing a model for the traumatized Clydesdale to follow. As weeks passed, Thunder's transformation became a powerful testament to the broader impact of their work. The massive horse gradually learned to trust again, his natural dignity returning as he mastered the guidance systems and began to move with increasing confidence. The story attracted media attention, but not for the usual reasons. This wasn't about racing or competition. It was about healing, about showing that even the deepest wounds could be overcome with the right support and understanding. Emily Chen, now a regular speaker at their educational programs, found particular inspiration in Thunder's progress. "See how he holds his head up now," she told a group of visiting children. "That's what happens when someone believes in you, when they give you the tools to believe in yourself." The experience with Thunder led to an expansion of their program. They began accepting more cases of traumatized horses, developing new protocols that combined physical rehabilitation with emotional healing. The research center became known not just for its technological innovations, but for its holistic approach to recovery. Maxwell Richmond's foundation increased their funding, allowing them to build a specialized trauma recovery wing. "What you're doing here," he said during the groundbreaking ceremony, "is showing us that technology and compassion aren't separate paths. They're most powerful when they work together." One cold morning, as Jack worked with Thunder in the arena, he noticed something extraordinary. The Clydesdale had started mimicking Echo's movements with unprecedented precision, matching the smaller horse's rhythm and spatial awareness. It wasn't just learning. It was a kind of silent communication between two beings who understood each other's world in a way no sighted horse could. "This is groundbreaking," Dr. Rodriguez exclaimed, reviewing the data from their session. "They're creating their own language of movement and sound. Thunder isn't just following Echo, they're actively collaborating, sharing information about their environment." The discovery led to new research into how blind horses communicate and process spatial information. Their findings suggested that the absence of visual input had led to the development of sophisticated, alternative methods of communication and environmental mapping. Sarah began incorporating these insights into their training programs. "We're not just teaching them to cope with blindness," she explained to a group of visiting veterinarians. "We're helping them develop and utilize abilities that most sighted horses never tap into." The impact of their work continued to ripple outward. Other rehabilitation centers began adopting their methods, not just for blind horses, but for animals with various physical and emotional challenges. The principles they developed proved adaptable to a wide range of situations. As winter deepened, they celebrated Thunder's first public demonstration. The once broken horse moved through their most challenging obstacle course with power and grace, his performance drawing tears from many who had known him in his earliest days at the center. "You see," Jack told the gathered observers, "the real breakthrough isn't in the technology or the training methods. It's in understanding that limitations don't define potential. Thunder didn't just learn to navigate without sight. He discovered strengths he never knew he had." The success with Thunder opened new doors. Military veterans programs began incorporating their methods into equine therapy. Schools for the blind expressed interest in adapting their technology for human use. Research institutions proposed collaborative studies into neural plasticity and adaptive learning. One evening, as snow fell softly outside, Jack sat in Thunder's stall, reflecting on how far they'd come. The massive horse stood peacefully beside him, occasionally nickering softly when Echo passed by their stall. The bond between the two blind horses had become something extraordinary, a partnership that transcended normal equine behavior. "You know what you've taught us?" Jack said quietly, stroking Thunder's powerful neck. "That sometimes our greatest strengths emerge from our deepest wounds. That what we think of as disadvantages can become the source of unexpected abilities." Dr. Rodriguez's latest research paper, featuring Thunder's case prominently, was already generating excitement in the scientific community. "We're seeing evidence of neural adaptation that goes beyond compensation," she explained. "These horses aren't just finding ways around their blindness. They're developing enhanced capabilities that we never knew were possible." As the year drew to a close, their facility had become more than a rehabilitation center or research institution. It was a place of transformation where limitations were redefined as opportunities, where wounds became sources of wisdom, and where the impossible became possible every day. The evening air was crisp with winter's bite as Jack made his final rounds. In their stalls, Echo and Thunder stood close together, their rhythmic breathing synchronized in the peaceful darkness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new horses to heel, new boundaries to push. But tonight, in the quiet of the barn, Jack could feel the truth that had guided them from the beginning, that sometimes the greatest achievements come not from conquering limitations, but from discovering the unexpected gifts they bring. Spring arrived at the research center with an unexpected challenge. A prestigious European racing organization had extended an unprecedented invitation. They wanted Echo to compete in the Grand Prix de Paris, one of the most challenging races in the world. The twist? They wanted him to race against exclusively sighted horses. "It's more than a race," Maxwell Richmond argued during an emergency board meeting. "It's a chance to show the world that different abilities don't mean inferior abilities." Jack stood at the window of the conference room, watching Echo train in the distance. The champion moved with characteristic grace, his every stride perfectly measured despite the complex patterns Sarah had set up for today's session. "The course in Paris is different from anything we've encountered," Dr. Rodriguez cautioned, spreading out diagrams on the table. "The turns are tighter, the field is larger, and the acoustic environment will be completely new." But it was Maria Torres, Echo's dedicated jockey, who voiced the most compelling argument. Echo isn't just racing for himself anymore. He's racing for every person who's been told their differences make them less capable. We have to try. The decision to accept the invitation set off a flurry of activity at the center. Dr. Rodriguez began developing new algorithms for their guidance system, accounting for the unique challenges of the Paris track. Sarah worked on adapting their training and protocols, while Mike brought in new horses to help Echo prepare for the larger field he'd face. The preparation revealed new aspects of Echo's capabilities. Under pressure, his ability to process multiple audio inputs simultaneously seemed to sharpen. He developed an almost supernatural awareness of the horses around him, anticipating their movements before they occurred. "Look at this," Dr. Rodriguez exclaimed one morning, pointing to her neural monitoring equipment. His brain is creating predictive models based on subtle changes in air pressure and sound. He's not just reacting to his environment, he's actively forecasting how it will change. The discovery led to refinements in their training system. They began incorporating predictive elements into the guidance technology, allowing Echo to prepare for changes in the race environment before they occurred. Word of their Paris bid spread quickly through the racing world, generating both excitement and skepticism. Some traditionalists argued that allowing a blind horse in such a prestigious race would diminish its significance. Others saw it as a powerful statement about the future of adaptive sports. Emily Chen, now a confident teenager and regular spokesperson for their program, addressed the critics during a press conference. "When people say Echo doesn't belong in this race, they're really saying that being different means being less capable. He's proving them wrong every day, just like all of us who refuse to be limited by other people's expectations." The preparation for Paris wasn't just technical. They had to prepare Echo for the unique challenges of international travel, the different acoustic environment of a foreign track, and the intense pressure of competing at such a prestigious level. Thunder, the rescued Clydesdale, played an unexpected role in the preparation. His powerful presence seemed to have a calming effect on Echo during particularly challenging training sessions. The two blind horses had developed a remarkable bond, communicating through subtle sounds and movements that even the researchers couldn't fully decode. One morning, as they worked through a particularly complex training sequence, Jack noticed something extraordinary. Echo wasn't just responding to their guidance system, he was anticipating it, adjusting his position slightly before the signals came through. He's internalized the patterns, Sarah realized, reviewing the data. The technology isn't just guiding him anymore, it's become an extension of his natural abilities. The observation led to a breakthrough in their training approach. Instead of focusing on perfect execution of predetermined patterns, they began developing more adaptive protocols that allowed Echo to respond dynamically to changing race conditions. Maxwell Richmond arrived one afternoon with unexpected news. The Paris organizers want to document Echo's preparation. They're calling it Seeing with Sound, a documentary about redefining possibility in sports. The film crew's presence added another layer of complexity to their preparation, but it also provided an opportunity to share their methods with a wider audience. The documentary captured not just Echo's training, but the broader impact of their work. At the center, they filmed Thunder working with newly arrived blind horses, showing how his own journey from trauma to triumph helped others find their way. They captured Emily leading tours for visiting school groups, demonstrating how Echo's story inspired young people to challenge their own perceived limitations. Dr. Rodriguez's research team documented the continuing evolution of their technology, showing how innovations developed for Echo were being adapted for various therapeutic applications. The center had become a hub of collaboration between scientists, trainers, and healthcare professionals. As the departure date for Paris approached, Jack spent extra time with Echo in the quiet evenings. The champion had grown not just in physical capability, but in a kind of wisdom that seemed to transcend normal horse behavior. "You understand what we're really doing, don't you?" Jack murmured one night, stroking Echo's neck. "This isn't just about winning a race. It's about showing the world that different doesn't mean less." The morning they left for Paris, the entire community gathered to see them off. Emily presented Echo with a specially braided good luck charm made from Thunder's mane. "To remind you that you're running for all of us," she said softly. The journey to Paris marked the beginning of a new chapter in their story. Echo wasn't just a blind horse who had learned to race. He had become a symbol of the extraordinary possibilities that exist when we dare to reimagine what's possible. As their plane took off, Jack thought about how far they'd come from that first day at Silvercrest Stables. They had done more than prove a blind horse could race. They had shown that limitations often hide unexpected gifts, waiting to be discovered by those willing to look beyond conventional wisdom. The Paris adventure would test everything they'd developed, every innovation, every technique. But win or lose, they had already achieved something remarkable. They had shown that the human spirit, combined with compassion and innovation, has the power to transform perceived weaknesses into extraordinary strengths. In the cargo hold below, Echo stood calmly in his special traveling stall, his sophisticated guidance system monitoring every aspect of his environment. The champion's quiet confidence spoke of a truth they had discovered together, that sometimes the greatest victories come not from overcoming limitations, but from discovering the unique abilities they inspire us to develop. The streets of Paris hummed with anticipation as Echo stepped onto the historic Longchamp racecourse for the first time. Ancient trees lined the track, their leaves creating unique acoustic patterns that Dr. Rodriguez immediately began incorporating into their guidance system's calculations. "The sound signatures here are completely different from what we've trained with," she explained, adjusting her equipment. "The way sound bounces off the grandstand, the way the wind moves through the trees, it all affects Echo's acoustic map." Maria Torres walked the course repeatedly, working with the team to understand every nuance of the challenging track. The final turn, notorious for its sharp angle and slight uphill grade, would test even sighted horses to their limits. "We need to give Echo every advantage," Sarah said, deploying their latest array of sensors. "The acoustic complexity here is unlike anything we've encountered." The French racing community had been skeptical of Echo's entry, but his first practice sessions silenced many critics. The blind champion moved with extraordinary precision, his ability to process the track's unique sound environment drawing gasps of amazement from observers. "Incroyable," whispered Jean-Pierre Dubois, one of France's most respected trainers. "He's not just running, he's reading the course in a way I've never seen before." Local media flocked to cover the unusual competitor, but it was a young girl's visit that truly captured the spirit of their mission. Marie Leclerc, blind from birth, had traveled from Marseille with her parents to meet Echo. "In France, they told me I could never ride," she said, her hands gentle on Echo's neck. "But you showed them that being blind doesn't mean being limited, n'est-ce pas?" Jack watched as Echo lowered his head to the girl's touch, the champion's usual pre-race intensity softening into something gentler. This moment, he realized, was what their journey had always been about, not just proving what was possible, but inspiring others to challenge their own perceived limitations. The day before the race brought unexpected complications. A storm system moved through Paris, altering the acoustic environment they'd carefully mapped. Dr. Rodriguez and her team worked through the night, adjusting their guidance systems to account for the changed conditions. Echo's ability to adapt is our greatest advantage, she reminded them. His brain processes changes in environmental conditions faster than any computer we've developed. Dawn broke clear and cool over Longchamp. The historic grandstand filled with spectators drawn by the unprecedented event, a blind horse competing in one of Europe's most challenging races. Among them sat Thunder's video feed played on the massive screens, the rescued Clydesdale watching from their home facility across the ocean. In the paddock, Echo stood calm amid the pre-race chaos, his ears moving constantly as he built his acoustic picture of the environment. The other horses and their handlers gave him a wide berth, still uncertain about the strange equipment he wore. Maria Torres mounted with practiced ease, her movements synchronized with Echo's guidance system. "Remember," Jack said softly, "trust what we've built. Trust what he can do." The call to post rang out across the ancient track. As Echo made his way to the starting gate, a sudden hush fell over the crowd. Even the skeptics couldn't help but be moved by the quiet confidence of the blind champion. The start was clean, Echo braking perfectly, despite the unfamiliar gait. He settled into his rhythm, using the sophisticated guidance system to create a real-time map of the horses around him. His hooves seemed to know exactly where to find purchase on the unfamiliar track. Through the first turn, Echo held his position, reading the subtle changes in air pressure and sound that told him where the other horses were. The years of training, every innovation they'd developed, came together in a symphony of motion and awareness. Down the backstretch, Echo began to move up through the field. His ability to process multiple audio inputs simultaneously allowed him to find gaps before they fully opened, to anticipate movements before they occurred. As they approached the final turn, the notorious curve that had ended many champions' dreams, Jack held his breath. This was the moment where all their preparation, all their innovation would be tested. Echo entered the turn with perfect precision, using the unique acoustic signature of the grandstand to guide his path. The other horses began to tire, their strides becoming less certain on the challenging grade. But Echo, running on something more than sight, maintained his rhythm. His hooves found the perfect line through the turn, each stride placing him exactly where he needed to be. The crowd rose to their feet as Echo emerged from the turn, now running second. The leader was 2 lengths ahead, but Echo was running. With the strength of every horse who had ever been discounted, every dream that had ever been dismissed as impossible. Maria Torres, feeling the power beneath her, gave Echo his signal. The champion responded with a burst of speed that seemed to defy physics. His ability to process acoustic information allowed him to find racing lines that sighted horses couldn't. See, 1 length behind, half a length. Echo drew even with the leader. The roar of the crowd became a physical force, but Echo's focus never wavered. He had learned to turn chaos into clarity, to find certainty in the midst of confusion. In the final strides, Echo surged forward, crossing the wire and neck in front. The impossible had become reality on one of racing's most hallowed grounds. The celebration that followed transcended normal racing protocol. Tears flowed freely as people recognized they had witnessed not just a sporting event, but a testament to the power of reimagining what's possible. Marie Leclerc, the blind girl who had visited them earlier, was brought to the winner's circle. Her smile as she touched Echo's victory wreath spoke of dreams reborn, of limitations transformed into possibilities. Back home, their research center erupted in celebration. Thunder's proud whinny echoed through the facility as he watched his friend's triumph on the screen. Emily Chen, surrounded by cheering staff and patients, wiped tears from her eyes. "You see?" she told the gathered crowd. "Different doesn't mean less. It just means finding your own way to be extraordinary." The victory at Longchamp became more than a racing achievement. It became a symbol of the human spirit's ability to transcend conventional limitations. Echo had shown the world that sometimes our greatest perceived weaknesses can become our most remarkable strengths. As twilight fell over Paris, Jack stood with Echo in the quiet of the ancient stable block. The champion's ears moved constantly, building his acoustic picture of this historic place where he had made history. "You did more than win a race today," Jack murmured, stroking Echo's neck. "You showed them that limitations only exist where imagination ends." Echo nickered softly in response, his victory marking not an end, but a beginning, a new chapter in their ongoing journey to redefine what's possible when we dare to look beyond conventional limitations. The international media dubbed it the Paris Effect. In the months following Echo's historic victory at Longchamp, the world of adaptive sports underwent a profound transformation. The research center became the epicenter of a revolution that extended far beyond horse racing, touching lives in ways no one had anticipated. One crisp autumn morning, Jack arrived at the facility to find an unusual gathering. Representatives from the International Paralympic Committee stood in the observation area, watching intently as Echo demonstrated their latest innovations. But they weren't alone. Beside them stood engineers from NASA, their eyes fixed on the sophisticated guidance systems that had helped a blind horse achieve the impossible. "Your technology has applications we never imagined," Dr. Sarah Chen from NASA's Neural Interface Division explained. "The way Echo processes spatial information without visual input, it could revolutionize how we design navigation systems for space exploration." Meanwhile, Dr. Rodriguez's team had made a breakthrough that stunned the scientific community. Their research into Echo's neural adaptation had revealed patterns that could help humans with visual impairments develop enhanced spatial awareness. "It's not just about compensation," she explained to a packed auditorium at a prestigious neuroscience conference. "Echo's brain showed us that the absence of one sense can lead to the development of capabilities we never knew existed." The implications reached beyond medicine and science. Architects began consulting with their team, learning how Echo's sound-based navigation could inform the design of spaces for visually impaired people. Urban planners studied their acoustic mapping technology, envisioning cities that could be navigated through sound as easily as sight. Marie Leclerc, the blind girl from Paris, returned to the center as part of a pioneering program that paired visually impaired youth with horses trained using Echo's methods. Her progress became a symbol of the broader impact of their work. "Before, Echo, they told me what I couldn't do," she said, sitting confidently astride a horse trained with their guidance system. "Now they're learning to ask, what else is possible?" The transformation wasn't limited to humans. Thunder, the rescued Clydesdale, had become a mentor figure for traumatized horses arriving at the center. His gentle presence and deep understanding of navigating without sight helped countless animals move from fear to confidence. One day, a documentary filmmaker captured a remarkable moment. Thunder guiding a newly blind horse through their training course, using subtle sounds and movements to communicate safe paths. The footage went viral, demonstrating that animals could not only adapt to disabilities but help others do the same. Maxwell Richmond's foundation expanded its support, establishing satellite centers across 5 continents. Each facility combined research, rehabilitation, and community outreach, spreading Echo's legacy of transforming limitations into new possibilities. What began as one man's belief in a blind foal has become a global movement, Richmond told a gathering of international investors. We're not just changing how we think about disabilities. We're discovering new human and animal capabilities we never knew existed. The racing world, initially skeptical, underwent its own revolution. Echo's success inspired the creation of new adaptive racing categories, but more importantly, it challenged fundamental assumptions about what made a champion. We used to think we knew what perfect looked like, legendary trainer Jean-Pierre Dubois reflected. Echo showed us that perfection isn't about matching a standard. It's about discovering new ways to excel. Emily Chen, now heading their youth advocacy program, worked with architects to design a revolutionary new therapeutic riding center. The facility incorporated everything they'd learned about acoustic navigation and spatial awareness, creating spaces that were equally accessible to sighted and unsighted users. We're not just building facilities, she explained to a group of design students. We're creating environments that challenge our assumptions about how spaces should be experienced. Jack found himself increasingly drawn to the quiet moments amidst the growing acclaim. One evening, he sat in Echo's stall, listening to the champion's steady breathing while reading letters from people whose lives had been touched by their story. A Paralympic athlete who found new training methods through their research. A veteran who regained confidence working with their therapy horses. A child who discovered she could dream beyond the limitations others had set for her. "You know what amazes me most?" he told Echo, stroking the champion's neck. "It's not the races you've won or the records you've set. It's how you've helped people see possibility where they used to see limitation." Dr. Rodriguez's latest research revealed something extraordinary. Echo's neural patterns had continued to evolve, showing adaptation capabilities that defied conventional understanding. The champion wasn't just maintaining his abilities, he was developing new ones. "It challenges everything we thought we knew about brain plasticity," she explained during a breakthrough presentation. Echo showing us that adaptation isn't just about compensation. It's about continuous evolution and discovery. The impact extended into unexpected areas. Military veterans working with Thunder found that his story of overcoming trauma resonated deeply with their own experiences. The Gentle Giant's journey from broken spirit to confident mentor offered a powerful metaphor for their own healing. Sarah developed a program specifically for children with multiple disabilities, combining their acoustic guidance technology with therapeutic riding techniques. The results challenged traditional beliefs about the limitations of various conditions. "What we're learning," she told a conference of rehabilitation specialists, "is that when we stop focusing on what's missing and start exploring what's possible, we discover capabilities we never imagined existed." The center became a place of constant innovation. Engineers worked alongside horse trainers, neuroscientists collaborated with riding instructors, and researchers from diverse fields found common ground in exploring new possibilities. One morning, as Jack watched Echo work with a group of young riders, each facing their own challenges, he realized something profound. Their journey had never really been about proving a blind horse could race. It had been about showing the world that different abilities create different possibilities. Marie Leclerc, now training to become an instructor herself, expressed it perfectly during a television interview. Echo taught us that sometimes what we think of as limitations are really invitations to discover new ways of being extraordinary. The research center continued to evolve, each breakthrough leading to new questions, each challenge revealing new opportunities. They had created more than a rehabilitation facility or a research institution. They had built a place where the impossible became possible every day. As autumn painted the surrounding hills in brilliant colors, Jack stood at the window of his office, watching Echo guide a newly arrived blind horse through their training course. The champion moved with the confidence of one who had not just overcome limitations, but transcended them. In that moment, Jack understood that their story had become something larger than any of them. It had become a testament to the human spirit's capacity to reimagine possibility, to find strength in difference, and to transform perceived limitations into unprecedented achievements. The letters continued to pour in from around the world, each sharing a story of how Echo's example had inspired someone to challenge their own perceived limitations. But perhaps the most powerful message came from a young girl who simply wrote, "Thank you for showing me that different isn't less. It's just a different way of being amazing." 5 years after Echo's groundbreaking victory at Longchamp, the research center hosted an unprecedented gathering. Representatives from 47 countries converged to witness the inauguration of the Global Adaptive Sports Initiative, a revolutionary program that would forever change how the world viewed ability and competition. Echo, now a distinguished figure in the world of adaptive sports, stood calm and dignified as Dr. Rodriguez unveiled their latest breakthrough, a neural interface system that could translate animal sensory experiences into data humans could understand. For the first time, they could truly comprehend how Echo saw the world through sound and sensation. What we've learned from Echo isn't just about adapting to blindness, Dr. Rodriguez explained to the assembled crowd. It's about understanding that there are entire realms of perception and ability we've never explored, because we were too focused on traditional definitions of capability. The presentation screen displayed complex neural mapping that showed how Echo's brain had developed extraordinary new pathways. These patterns had inspired innovations far beyond the world of horse racing, from revolutionary urban design to breakthrough treatments for neurological conditions. "Watch this," Sarah said, activating their newest guidance system. Echo moved through a complex obstacle course while the screen showed his real-time neural activity. The audience gasped as they witnessed how the champion processed spatial information in ways that challenged fundamental assumptions about consciousness and perception. Marie Leclerc, now a confident young woman and head of their international youth program, stood to address the gathering. "Echo didn't just show us new ways to overcome challenges," she declared. "He showed us that what we think of as limitations are often gateways to discovering extraordinary new abilities." The day's events included demonstrations from graduates of their program, horses and humans who had learned to transform their perceived limitations into unique strengths. Thunder, the once broken Clydesdale, led a group of therapy horses, showing how trauma could become a source of healing for others. Emily Chen, who had grown from an inspired young girl to a pioneering advocate for adaptive sports, presented research showing how their methods had transformed rehabilitation programs worldwide. "We're not just helping people adapt to disabilities," she explained. "We're discovering new human potential." Maxwell Richmond, who had witnessed the journey from skeptic to believer, announced the Foundation's most ambitious initiative yet, a worldwide network of research and rehabilitation centers, each dedicated to exploring new frontiers of ability and adaptation. "What started with one man's belief in a blind foal," he said, gesturing to Jack, "has become a global movement to redefine what's possible." The afternoon brought a special moment as they dedicated the center's new quantum computing facility, Henderson, a partnership with NASA to explore how Echo's neural processing could inform next-generation navigation systems for space exploration. Echo's ability to create accurate spatial maps without visual input has revolutionary implications for how we approach cosmic navigation, explained Dr. Sarah Chen. "We're learning that sometimes the absence of one capability leads to the development of extraordinary new ones." As evening approached, the center hosted a unique demonstration. Using their advanced neural interface, they allowed participants to experience the world as Echo perceived it, a rich tapestry of sound, air pressure and vibration that created a four-dimensional understanding of space and movement. "It's not darkness," one amazed scientist remarked, removing the interface headset. "It's a completely different way of experiencing reality, one that in some ways is richer than visual perception." Jack stood quietly with Echo as the day's events wound down, reflecting on how far they'd come from that morning at Silvercrest Stables. The champion's influence had extended far beyond racing, touching fields from neuroscience to space exploration, from urban design to trauma recovery. Dr. Rodriguez joined them, carrying her latest research findings. "Echo's legacy isn't just in what he achieved," she said softly. "It's in how he's helped us understand that different abilities create different possibilities, and sometimes those possibilities exceed anything we imagined." The research center had become more than a facility. It was a symbol of the human spirit's capacity to transform limitations into discoveries. Every day brought new breakthroughs, new understanding, new ways of seeing potential where others saw constraints. Thunder approached, his powerful presence a reminder of how far they'd come. The once broken horse now moved with quiet confidence, his own journey from trauma to triumph, inspiring others to find strength in their struggles. As the sun set over the facility, casting long shadows across the grounds where so many lives had been transformed, Jack watched Echo move through the evening routine they'd established years ago. The champion's movements were still precise, still graceful, but now carried the wisdom of one who had helped change the world's understanding of possibility. "You know what I've learned from you," Jack murmured, stroking Echo's neck, "that sometimes our greatest achievements come not from overcoming limitations, but from discovering the unique gifts they inspire us to develop." Echo nickered softly. In response, his ears moving constantly, building his acoustic picture of the world around him. In that moment, Jack understood that their journey had never really been about proving what a blind horse could do. It had been about showing the world that different abilities create different kinds of excellence. The letters continued to arrive daily, each sharing a story of how Echo's example had inspired someone to challenge their own perceived limitations. But perhaps the most powerful message came from a young rider in their program who simply wrote, "Echo taught me that being different isn't about being less. It's about being extraordinary in your own unique way." As darkness fell over the facility, the soft sounds of horses settling for the night mixed with the quiet hum of advanced equipment. In Echo's stall, the champion stood peaceful and content, his presence a living testament to the power of believing. In possibilities others couldn't see, tomorrow would bring new challenges, new discoveries, new opportunities to expand the boundaries of what people believed possible. But tonight, in the quiet darkness, Jack celebrated the simple truth at the heart of their journey, that sometimes the greatest limitations we face are the ones we place on our own imagination. Echo's story had become more than a tale of a blind horse who learned to race. It had become a beacon of hope, showing the world that different abilities create different possibilities, and that sometimes what we perceive as limitations can become the source of extraordinary new capabilities. The research center would continue to grow, to innovate, to challenge assumptions about ability and potential. But its greatest achievement would always be in showing that when we dare to look beyond conventional limitations, we discover that the human spirit, combined with compassion and innovation, has the power to transform perceived weaknesses into remarkable strengths. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't. Want to pass these up? Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.